All right. When we had a to the third times a to the second, we said that meant what? What did that mean? Well, we said, hey, a to the third means an a times an a times an a. And a to the second meant a times a. So all that together means a to the what? Fifth power. Now, if we have this, let's say we had a problem where we had like a to the second over a to the fourth. What if we're dividing them? Well, again, let's just think what it means. A to the second means a times a. A to the fourth means an a times an a times an a times an a. Well, if I'm dividing something, 5 divided by 5, that equals 1. 7 divided by 7 equals 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. So these a's, basically, a divided by a just gives us a 1 over 1, doesn't it? That a and that a 1 over 1. And this answer would simplify. Up top, we have 1 times 1, which is 1. In the bottom, we have 1 times a, which is just 1 over a squared. So that's how we do problems like that when we have fractions. So let's take a look at this one. Well, if we write out what it means, not trying to remember any rules. Remember, we understand things we never forget. So 4 times a times a b, all over. In the bottom, I have a 6. A times a times a times a, b times b. Now, it's division. So things can cross out. Things can simplify to 1. Well, first of all, the 4 and 6, both these could be divided by 2, which makes it 2/3, because we know 4/6 is the same as 2/3. This a and this a can cross out and become 1s. That a and that a cross out and become 1s. That b and that b cross out and become 1s. So what are we left with? Let's look what we have up top. 2 times 1 times 1 times 1, 2. 3 times 1 is 3. I have an a times a, which is a squared, and I have a b. So that simply simplifies 2 over 3a squared b. It should be easy enough. Now, if we take our calculator, what does x to the negative 1 mean? Well, it means that you're looking for the reciprocal. Okay? The reciprocal, which means 1 over the number. A lot of calculators, instead of having x to the negative 1, will simply have a key that says 1 over x. It's the reciprocal of the number. So let's say we have 2 to the negative 1. That means the reciprocal of 2. Well, that's just 1 over 2. 3 to the negative 1, that's just the reciprocal, which is 1/3. Two numbers are reciprocals if when you multiply them together, you get 1. 3 times 1/3 is 1. 2 times a half is 1. 5 to the negative 1, 1/5, because 5 times 1/5. 10 to the negative 1, 1/10. What about 10 to the negative third? Well, that means 1 over 10 to the third, which is 1 over 1,000, because 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000. Let's look at this for a second. Let's just talk about 10 to the third, which means 10 times 10 times 10. Notice this is 1,000. 10 squared, 10 times 10, that's 100. 10 to the first, well, that's just 10. What about 10 to the 0? Well, do we notice a pattern here? Notice that it goes from 1,000 to 100 to a 10. The decimal point just seems to move back each time. So 10 to the 0, if I move the decimal back 1 on 10, becomes 1. What about 10 to the negative 1? Well, if we take that decimal and move it back 1, it would be a 10th. 10 to the negative 2, well, if I move that decimal back 1, 0.01, which notice is same as 100th. And if I move the decimal back one more time, 0.01, which is 1 over 1,000. Notice if I kept going, I would never get to 0. 10 to the negative infinity is not quite 0. It approaches 0, but it's not quite 0. The decimal is simply moving back. A negative exponent does not ever mean that what you have is negative. So let's look at problem 1 here. We have n to the negative 3 times n to the 5th. Well, let's think what it means. Well, n to the negative 3 means that n is down below. We have n to the third power in the denominator. So whenever you and I see an exponent, an exponent that's negative, or a number that's raised to a negative exponent, it's going to tell me, hey, move it to the bottom. Move it, move it, move it. So I'm going to know right off, I'm going to make a fraction bar as soon as I see a negative exponent. And I know that n to the third has to go down there below into the denominator. Up top, we still have n to the fifth. Well, now all I have to do is simplify. I think what it means, n, and n there. And if we say, hey, those cross out and become ones, each becomes a 1, becomes a 1, becomes a 1. I'm left with an n squared over 1, and anything divided by 1 is itself. So it's just an n squared. Problem 2, I have quite a few. I see a negative exponent right here, so right away, I write my fraction bar. A to the negative third, I'm putting it down below. N squared, he doesn't have a negative exponent, so I'll leave him. A squared, no negative exponent, so I'll leave him. That does have a negative exponent, so we move it down below. Now, when I clean this up, n squared is an n, a squared is aa. Down below, I have a, and an n. Crossing things out. That n and that n can cross out. That a and that a can cross out and become ones. And that a cross out and become ones. What are you left with up top? N. And down below, you're left with a. So it's just this whole expression simplifies to simply n divided by a. What about this guy? Well, let's write him here. Again, I have a fraction, but wait a second, there's negative exponents in the denominator. Well, if you flip it from the denominator and it's got to go down below, where do you think it ends up? We could explain that, but again, video might take a little long time. But this negative 3 is saying, hey, he's going to end up going down below. But this guy, if he moves below, it ends up just flipping him back up top. So let's clean this up. I have a squared here, so that's just a squared. B to the negative 3 tells me he's going to go below. I come now down below in the denominator, I have a negative 1. That's going to flip it back up to the top. And then b squared just stays where he is. So again, negative exponents, if you're in a fraction, if you're up top, you're going to the bottom. If you're in the bottom, you're going to the top. I have a up top because AA is the a squared. B cubed is BBB and then a BB. So this gives us, nobody cancels out, a to the third over b to the fifth. Look at this guy. He's got all types of things. So negative exponents will move. So here's my fraction bar. If you don't have a negative exponent, not a negative number, but a negative exponent, that's how you're moving. Negative exponents are moving. So I see the 4 right here. So he's fine. A squared, he's fine. B negative 2, got to move. C negative 1, got to move. Now, I can put a 1 here if I want, but it's understood that you only have one of them, so I don't. Now come to the bottom. 2 to a negative 1. He's to a negative exponent, so he's going to move where? Up top. The A, no, nothing, so he stays. B, negative third, so he moves up top. C, nothing, so he stays where he is. The only pieces that move are those that have negative exponents. That means this guy had to move, this guy had to move, this guy had to move, and this guy had to move. So these two that were in the bottom went up top, as we can see right here. And then those in the top moved to the bottom. So we now clean this up. So I think we can fit it here. Let's see. 4AA times a 2 times a BBB all over in the bottom, a BB, a CAC. Now I'm going to cross things out. Well, let's see. A B and a B can go with those two. They become ones. I have an A here and an A here. And that looks like it. I don't have any C's. I have 2 C's at the bottom, but nobody up top. So now I clean it up. 4 times 2 is 8. I have a single A that takes care of everything up top. No, it doesn't. Forgot I had a B there. Got to be careful. And then all that was left in the bottom, c squared. That's what this simplifies to. Again, negative exponents, if it's in the numerator, it goes to the denominator. If it's in the denominator, it moves up to the numerator. What about this guy? Okay, this is a whole nother ball game here because it's a whole quantity in parentheses raised to the negative 2. Here's how we view this, okay? The way I view this, I got to know what it means. Well, I'm going to manipulate this a little bit. I'm going to say, hey, this negative 2 right here on the outside of that parentheses, I'm going to view that as a negative 1 times 2, which is true. Negative 2 is simply a negative 1 times a 2. And now what I can do is I can go ahead and just look at this right here. What does a negative 1 mean? A negative 1 means you're talking the reciprocal. Everybody that's in the bottom goes to the top. Everybody in the top goes to the bottom. The reciprocal of anything is simply you flip the fraction. So this fraction becomes b goes to the top and the 2a goes to the bottom. So that's what this in the box is. So I've done the negative 1. I've done that. Now, what is outside here? There's the squaring that falls on it. So all I'm going to do is take this in the purple, flip the fraction, and then square it. If I'm squaring it, it means you have a b over 2a times another b over 2a. That gives you a b squared. 2 times 2 is 4. A times a is a squared. There's your answer. All right? Now, I know that's a little difficult, but you just follow those steps. You always change this right here. When you have a negative exponent outside the parentheses, just change it to a negative 1 times the number. And then you're going to do the reciprocal. Let's look at another example. Let's say we have this. I see a negative 2. I'm going to change that to a negative 1 times 2. However, before I do that, I better take care of what's inside. Imagine this. Imagine that I get a phone call and my mother is coming over in 10 minutes. Now, I wanted to mow because the outside of my house looks terrible, but the inside is just trashy as can be. We just haven't cleaned dishes in a week. What do you think you would want to clean first? The outside, mowing the yard, or clean up all the dishes and all the trash on the inside? Always clean up the inside. Okay, so here we're going to clean up what's inside parentheses first, always. So before I do anything, I know I need to rewrite this as a 3 over a squared because that negative exponent right there said move me to the bottom. So this is 3 over a squared to the negative 2, which now, since I've cleaned up the inside, I got everything nice, I can concentrate on the outside, which is the negative 1 times 2. Now I'm going to do what the last problem said to do is I'm going to simply evaluate this. A negative 1 means nothing but flip everybody. So we're going to basically flip everybody. So the 3 will go to the bottom. The a squared will go to the top. And now I've taken care of that negative 1, so it's gone. But I still have a squaring on it. So I have a squared over 3 times another one. A squared over 3. That's an AA. That is a to the 4th. 3 times 3, 9, not 6. And so this answer becomes a to the 4th over 9. What about this? Again, look inside the parentheses. Do I need to clean it up? The answer is yes. This needs to move to the bottom, right? And that, since it's in the bottom, moves to the what? Top. And one more. Okay. So let's move them. That a squared we said goes below. B squared stays where it is. That c moves to the top. Now I can change that negative 2 to a negative 1 times 2 because I've cleaned up the inside of my house. All the dishes are clean. But now I'm going to deal with the outside. I'm going to relook at it as a negative 1 times 2. Okay. What does a negative 1 do? It takes all this right here and it just gives you the reciprocal. Everybody moves. A squared in the bottom, b squared c. And now, since I've taken care of that -1, I've done that by flipping it, I can now just simply square it. So I have this, which is an a squared b squared c times another a squared b squared c. Well, we can write it out if we want. Here I'm not going to. A to the fourth. B to the fourth. C times c, c squared. 2 more to go. Okay. We look on the inside. Do we need to clean it up? Well, since you have a negative exponent, yes, you better clean it up. That a squared is going to move below. Y stays where it is. I've cleaned up the inside, so now I evaluate that by saying, hey, that's a -1 times 2. What does a -1 mean? Well, we go ahead and we take care of all that. -1 just says, give me the reciprocal. Flip it. So I flip it. A squared y over a -2. Everybody was flipped, and now I'm going to square it. When I square something, it means multiply it by itself. You have 2 of them. When we do this, a to the fourth, y times y is y squared, -2 times -2, +4. Final one here. What if we just have the fraction 2/5 to -2? Well, 2/5, do I need to move anybody? No. So this is simply 2/5. Instead, what do I do with that -2? I'm going to reevaluate it as a -1 times 2. So I now will take that and flip it. And then simply square it, which gives us 25/4. The reason it does is because you have a 5/2 times a 5/2, which gives you 5 times 5, 25, 2 times 2, 4. I know that's a lot of different things with those negative exponents. Rewind it, look at it again, and again, use the other videos I have to help you with the homework. Good luck.